Hey everyone, welcome to my Java video tutorial number 2. In this tutorial, we will be going over basic variables, how to declare them, how to use them, and etc. So let's jump into it. And if you have not watched the previous episode, then make sure you go do that in order to see how everything is all set up. So here we'll start a new class. We'll do lesson 2, just so I don't confuse all of you. And then I want this, so copy and paste. So here we have our public static void main string args. Now you don't have to start a new class like I did, but I just did for the sake of organization. So lesson 2. Now in this lesson here are the basic types. We have bytes, shorts, integer, float, long, double, and more we have is char, which is a character. Character is equal to a, and then we have our strings, which is a string is equal to hello world. Now let me go on and explain what all of these mean. So when you declare a variable, you must put the data type, which is a byte, short, integer, float, long, char. Yeah, that's our data type. And then we have our variable name. So that's just whatever we want to name it. It could be anything really, but you want to keep it to something that's relevant. And then after that we have equals, and then we put our value. Semicolon, of course, because every line ends with a semicolon. Now let me get down to explaining these. So bytes is just a short number that goes up to 127. You see that a lot in input-output streams, but we'll get more into that later. And then we have shorts, floats, long, and double. So these are important to know, but the main things we really want to focus on are integers, doubles, and chars. Though these guys, and strings as well, these guys are commonly used. They are most common, and these are the only things you really need to know. These are certainly important, but you'll get familiar along with them as you move on later downwards. So we'll just highlight that for now. Everything in a backslash, by the way, is just basically taken out as a note. You just write a side note, and when you run the Java program, it will not be read. This will be completely ignored. So in here we want to focus on integers, double, char, and string. So integer is any real number. It can be positive or negative. A double is a decimal place. Large double. We could just put a double. And then we have just decimal places, 3.14, etc., etc. Then we have chars or characters. Characters are a single character. It's A, B, C, D. You cannot put multiple. It'll give you back an error. Just a single one. And you have to set it using apostrophes. Open and close apostrophes. You put your value inside of that, and that's how you declare a character. Now we have strings. A string is a string of characters put together, or a char sequence. Basically, that just means any line of text, hello world. Numbers can be put into here as well, which open and closed by quotation marks. Spaces are also part of a character. You can have just a space, and that should be fine. And we can have spaces here. Everything matters. Spaces matter, but white space does not matter. Spaces do, white spaces don't. What are white spaces? White spaces are like the spacing in here. Like if you have integer and then we have our number there, or we have this over here. It doesn't matter. It still will run just fine. It's not exactly a good thing, and if somebody looks at your code, they're going to be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But Java does ignore the white space. But spaces in value types such as characters and strings are significant. They do matter. So, what can we do with these? First off, understand that integers, double, chars, and bytes, short, float, longs, they are primitive types. What are primitive types? Primitive types are basically just think of numbers. They are something the computer can understand, and it is fairly universal. So that's what primitive types are. As you can see, they are highlighted in purple. Now, is string a primitive type? No, it is not. A string is not a primitive type. A string is what we call a reference type, meaning that it is a pre-coded class that has been used and we are referencing it. We'll go more into it later on, but it is not a primitive type. Just know that it is a reference type. A lot of people, they believe that strings are primitive types, but that is incorrect. Strings are not primitive types. They are reference types. Now, characters. We define primitive types as a sort of number, is something a computer can understand. Now, is a character a primitive type? Is it a number? Well, yes, it is. Actually, characters are numbers. I will prove it to you guys later on, but just know that characters are numbers. So, what can we do with these? When you declare a variable, we have our data type, variable name, and value. Now, what if we want to use it? All we have to do is type in the variable name. So system.out.println. I said I would explain it in this tutorial. System basically means, just think of our computer. That's not like an explicit definition, but it's just our computer. Out means going outwards. It's our output stream. Again, if you don't really understand that, we'll go more into it later. Println is just print line. So it'll just print that line of whatever is in these parentheses. We'll go more into detail maybe later on, or you'll just pick it up on your own. And so system.out.println, what it does is it takes our system and prints it out into our console, which is right here. So system.out.println, we want to use a variable, right? So let's print out the first number. Let's change that funky number to a simple 5. We could change the system.out.println integer. Now, what we'll print out here? It will be 5. There we go. We got a 5 right here. Now, same goes with everything else. We can go a double, 3.13, which is right here. And we have character. And you see what I'm trying to get at? This is just using your variables. You do not need to redeclare them. And so that's how we use it. Now, another thing with data types is that there is something called casting, where we can convert data types over to another. So let's say we have a double, double right here. We already have a wonderful double to use. Now we want an integer from it. Okay, we'll say integer. This is declaring a new variable. Integer double to int is equal to a double. So this is throwing us an error. Why is it giving us an error? Because an integer does not equal a double. They might be primitive types, but they are not the same things. You cannot put them together. You cannot convert from a double to an integer. So how are we going to do that? We have something called casting. Casting is just basically converting it, like we just said. So in order to cast it, we have our parentheses, and inside the parentheses we put what we want to cast it to. So we want to cast it to an integer, and now everything's fine and dandy. We just have not used it yet, so let's print it out. System.out.println double to integer. And here we go, a 3. So what it does is it converts a double, a decimal place, to an integer, a real number, or whole number. Now, Java does not follow rounding rules. If we have this set to 99999, it will go to 3 as well. It takes the first whole number, and that is what it is converted to. Now we can also do it the other way around. We can have double converting to integer by switching these around. We could do double, and then we could do double, and then here we could put integer, and we're just converting an integer to a double, and we can display that 5.0. So that's how you cast. Now, I told you earlier that characters are numbers. Now, let me prove that to you. So we have character. So let's do integer char2 int is equal to, cast it, integer and character. Now, character, our variable name, holds the value, which is declared here. It holds the value a. So character is equal to a. If we print out character, and we take that out for a minute, this is a. Now, let's take this back in. And after we've casted it, system.out.println char2 int, we will get a number. So this shows that characters are indeed numbers. If you want a full list of it, you can Google character to number relation, and you can get the complete list. Capital letters and lowercase letters do have a different number ID, so you can check out that online. You don't have to memorize it by any means. And so that is all fine and dandy. We can also convert it the other way around. We can convert, let's say we have the integer, let's change that to 97, and we'll just delete that. We change integer to 97, so char integer to character is equal to casted character 97. So in the previously we saw that a is equal to 97, the character ID number. So if we print out integer, we'll get 97. And when we convert 97, sorry, let's do this to make it more easily to understand. When we convert it to a character, we could do system.out.println int to char, and then we'll see this will print out 97, and this will print out a. So you can convert it back and forth. And there we go. Now, what about strings? What can we do with strings? Now, can you cast a string to a primitive type? No, you cannot. You cannot do string int to string is equal to string int. You cannot do that. It throws back an error, and you cannot cast from integer to string. The reason being is because casting it, you can't cast primitive types or reference types together. We'll go more into detail later, but just know that you cannot do that. So how are we going to convert them? We have a handy method called integer dot to string. And in this method, what it does is it inputs an integer, so we can put int right here, and this will convert it to a string. And that might be a little confusing, but we'll explain it later on. Just think of it more as this is more of a word instead of an actual number. So we could print out 97. This just converts it to a string. And you can also do it with doubles or floats, bytes. They all have it. And now, what if we want to convert a number string? So let's do string. A number is equal to 55. Okay. Numbers can be part of a string as well. And if we do system.out.println, let me just show you real quick. A number plus 5. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you have a string plus 5, what it is a string, and you're adding 5 to that string. The plus sign means you're adding strings together. It's basically just stitching them together. So system.out.println a number plus 5. Since this is a string and this is a number, this will be 555 right here. Now, what if this is an integer? If we have integer, let's use int real quick, just a simple variable. Int plus 5, and then we print that out. It's going to be 102 because it adds 97 to 5. So that is something we might need it for in the future. Again, when we go into more complex code, you'll see its usefulness. So in order to convert an integer to a string back to an integer, we can do integer int is equal to integer.parseInt a number. And that converts the string back into a number. So if we do this, this should throw back a 60. So it adds it together. Now, what did I just do? Integer is equal to integer.parseInteger. This is called overriding. When you have a variable, you can call upon that variable and you can set it equals to another value. And you just overwrote the previous variable. Now, this previous variable, though, once you override it, it's gone. You cannot go back to it unless you redeclare it. If I do integer is equal to 60, and then system, oh, that might be confusing. Let's do 80, and then system.out.println integer. There we go. And we can see that we overrode it. It was 60 because 55 plus 5. And then we go down here and system.out.println integer, which is 80. There we go. And once we have all that, that is all fine and dandy. So these are the different variable types. We'll go. If you can't really understand it 100%, don't worry. When we go into actual programming, and we start using these variables, you'll start to grow familiar with it. So just understand and know what you can do with them. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll see you all in the next video.